Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming along this afternoon. We've got a fabulous panel here for you on the subject of, what role can agri-tech play in helping the UK meet its net zero targets, we'll be asking. We'll be asking, can Labour help British farming to reach net zero through science and innovation? We'll be asking about what farmers can do, about what the government can do, about what industry can do, and about what you can do. And I think that if you are having tea or coffee with us this afternoon from outside, I believe it's very special milk, which we might hear more about in a moment. On our panel, we've got a great lineup for you. I'll just introduce them briefly, and then we can get our discussion started. I'm Fiona Harvey. I'm an environment editor at The Guardian. I've been covering this subject for almost 20 years, and it's really encouraging to me to see that there is so much interest in how we reach net zero for agriculture, because it's a massive source of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. And if we don't tackle farming, if we can't get to net zero with farming, then we won't be able to reach our net zero targets. We're in a lot of trouble on a lot of aspects of net zero, but in farming ought to be something that the UK can do well. The UK has often been a leader in farming innovation in the past, so why aren't we one now? It's one of the questions I'd like to put to our panellists. We've got for you this afternoon Baroness Anderson of Stoke-on-Trent, who's the shadow spokesperson for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. We've got Thomas Hafner, who's here from a company called Mootral, which we'll hear more about shortly. We've got Ed Tars, a farmer, who is using some innovative technology on his Braids farm, which is whereabouts? Is that Lancashire?
That's right.
Yeah. And it's a family farm, a family dairy farm, I think, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll hear more about that shortly. We've also got Nick Renison, another farmer, beef farmer this time from Cumbria. And finally, we've got Rishi Madlani, who's from the SERA Executive, which is Labour's environment campaign, which I'm sure that many of you are familiar with. Great, so we'll hear from all of you shortly, but we're going to hear from you, Baroness Anderson, first. What do you think that Labour should be doing?
I think I'm probably the least interesting person on this panel for everyone to hear from. But thank you so much for coming, and this just shows both the passion about, I hope, about the Labour Party heading into government, given the number of people here, but also that this is time to get into the detail of what we need to do as we get ready for government. So you may have been doing this for 20 years, I've been doing this for 20 weeks, so please bear with me. But actually one of the things I think coming at it from with a fresh pair of eyes is I had no idea how much Defra as a department was struggling. I had no idea about the impact on those people who were trying to access Defra for services, the fact that even in this day and age it is still a paper-based system, that moving forward the chaos that has ensued post-ELMS, and actually that is both the fault of people like me who should have known, but also the fault of the sector who have tried very quietly to get to make this work and not shouted enough beyond Farming Today, which I'm now a regular listener of. So what I can say to you, I'm here because what I really want to do is learn from you and to know how we can make this work. We're clear on our commitments to net zero. We're also clear of the challenge the challenges that we face to get there. What we've said, and our position is clear, is that we will not rip up the current programmes on offer. We won't rip up ELMS. We won't change the SIF programme. What we will do is work with you to make it work, as opposed to where it currently is. We have to appreciate, and it should surprise nobody, I am all about people. The fact that 33% of farmers are now considering 10% considering leaving the sector within the next 18 months. 23% not convinced they'll still be doing it in 5 years' time puts us in a place where we need to make this work, especially when we consider the wider geostrategic position and what's happened in Ukraine, making sure that our sector in the UK is resilient and has the resources it needs. So really, I'm here to learn from you to know how we can deliver on the promises that we've made and what will work for you.
Great, I think we can promise you some ideas on that.
Get my notebook out.
Great, thank you. Right, we'll move on to Thomas. Thomas, you are interested in various ways in innovation in British agriculture. Do you think there's an appetite for innovation among farmers? Are farmers not just so beaten down by their experiences over the last few years?
Well, I've got a champion for those that are interested in next to me here. And on the whole, farmers are very interested in this. Farmers are aware of the social contract they hold with us, with the public. But farmers have been reduced to cheap producers, and there's just no more air for them to engage in these measures or to absorb any more costs. And it is a clear message we've gotten from farmers. It is that the stimulus needs to come from other sources. It needs to come from industry, and it needs to come from government in the absence of industry stepping up. And we'll talk later about what industry could be doing, just touch on it, because we're here to talk about what government could be doing. But ultimately, if no one steps up, we are in a climate emergency, government will have to step in like it does in other ways. Why not here?
Thank you very much. And what do you think is the most important thing that government can do?
I think there are two things. We have policy and we have regulators. From a regulating perspective, we have regulatory frameworks that cannot, the way they're structured now, cannot pay heed or give credit to the emergency, to the speed that we need. We call it climate speed internally. So we need to design regulatory frameworks that, on the one hand, give us the rigor and confidence in products that can make a difference. On the other hand, also get these things to market as quickly as possible, as other countries are looking at the moment as well. And we're working with regulatory authorities around the world, and we can definitely share with you guys and how that could look. And then on the policy side, of course, there are a whole number of ways one could look at that. But first of all, making it clear that the British government does support and is behind this and understands the urgency and does support initiatives such as this and recognises its role in getting solutions like that approved. 7 years ago, we went as the first solution provider in the world to Marrakesh, to COP22. This year we have COP28. We missed one in 2020. So that's a lot of time that has passed since then. And we show that having a solution is one thing to make massive impacts on emissions from agriculture. Getting those deployed is a whole other thing. And we showed how we can create a win-win-win-win. We called it everybody participates, everybody wins model. And what I would like to do is, and why we're here, is to reach out to an incoming government and say, hey, reach hands with us, and let's design the right policies, the right incentives, the right signals to industry, to investors, to farmers, to the world at large, that we're open for business for this. Other countries are doing this, and it's time we caught up, because the world leading company in this space sits right here.
Excellent, thank you. And Ed, what do you think? Are farmers actually keen to know about net zero, or is it just another headache they wish would go away?
Well, firstly, the average age of a farmer is around 59, so it's probably natural that a number of farmers are looking at leaving the industry. That has partly been because of some of the incentives that have been based on farmers in terms of holding on to land for inheritance tax reasons and such, and then further to that, we've been incentivised to produce more for less. That has been the only levers that we could have had on our businesses. And it's really important for farmers collectively to be incentivised to do much more complex services than that. Collectively, we're responsible for producing, well, now around 60% of the UK's food. We also own the majority of the land where the rest of the nature lives. We release a lot of emissions, so we have the opportunity to reduce that. But further, we have the soil where we can store carbon. We have forests and woodland where we can actually take carbon out of the atmosphere. And no other industry has the levers that farmers have. We just need to collectively be incentivised to be able to provide more services and commodities as cheap as possible.
Great. And how would you incentivise farmers to do that?
Well, there's two ways to do that really. There's taking the brakes off, so some of that is around regulation, and then there's the accelerator, so that's helping innovation, helping research. Sometimes, especially around solutions, the big challenge for farmers that have for their whole career been producing stuff for less. All we're focused on is our cost of production, and someone comes along and says, okay, we've got this innovative solution, it's going to cost you this many hundred thousands of pounds, and the farmer just shrivels because, hey, we can't afford that. We've got no money in the bank, so they might be asset rich but cash poor. So when a solution comes along that you could innovate to help get to net zero, but that requires cash, then suddenly we turn and run away from it. Especially if our market isn't interested, and a lot of the power, there's quite a lot of farmers, but there's very few processors and even fewer supermarkets. So if you're incentivized by them supermarkets, actually, if you make this investment and you need to pay that back over 10 years, we will back you and purchase your product at or above cost of production to allow you to make that sort of investment, whereas we don't have them sort of mechanisms throughout the industry on average.
Thank you. Do you think the government needs to do more about the power of the supermarkets?
I think the government needs to do more about the power of the supermarkets. The supermarkets, there being few of them and them having economies of scale and being a strong purchaser is a good thing for the public. Cheap food is a good thing for the public. Maybe sometimes we need to be incentivised to do the right thing, not necessarily through the market. Maybe we need to be incentivised by other mechanisms for providing different services. Because telling a story through the supply chain is very difficult. Products get mixed, they get passed along, they get rebranded. But actually sometimes the services, if you were just incentivised to do them there and then, you understand that you can get your payback. So maybe the story going with the food isn't necessarily always the right mechanism.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you want to invite them to sit at the front? Just people that are struggling for seats, that's all.
Is that okay?
Sorry, there's some seats at the front. I'm going to do that
There are
horrible
seats
thing.
here.
But if people want to come and get a seat, there are seats here.
There
One
are
each,
seats. Yeah, these are not reserved. You can come and sit
I
up
told you
here.
this is scary.
Yeah.
Oh, you know?
If there's anyone else lurking outside who wants to come in, you can come
I
in.
might bring Nikki down.
Someone can summon them in. Yeah. You're very welcome here, and there are lots of seats at the top. Yeah. Always room at the top. Yeah. There we go. Anyone else? Do come in. Come on in. Right, we're going to hear from you now, Nick. You're a beef farmer from Cumbria, as I said. And, well, what is your experience, and what do you think the government should be doing?
So I farm Barton, Belching. So I was brought up on a quite intensive dairy farm in Shropshire, and when I was growing up I was all for pushing production. And then when we started, my husband and I started farming in our own rights, we quickly realised that high production agriculture, where you're using lots of fertiliser, lots of feed, lots of inputs, you keep everyone else really happy, and you're always writing checks to people, but you're actually struggling. So we come to realise that if we work, and this sounds waffly if there's any farmers in the room, but when you start to work with nature and embrace what nature can do, everything just starts to sing, and you end up kind of farming in abundance. And I recognise that this is a meeting on science and technology, but I don't know whether it's because I'm of a certain age, but I just think it's a kind of bit of a sexy thing that some people like to get hung up on. And if our most sexiest thing we do on the farm is use electric fences. So we have up to 200 head that roam around 400 acres on day shifts, and that's done with electric fencing, and that's as technologically exciting as it gets. The thing that we could do is have drones that would kind of spot a cow calving or maybe even move them in time. But I'm talking from a beef and sheep perspective here, but beef and sheep farmers don't need any more technology. We just need to look after our soils better and understand how grass grows. Thank you.
Looking after soil sounds like a good idea. How would you look after the soil?
It's just the agricultural education system doesn't really teach students about soil. Soil science isn't really a thing. It's like doctors don't really learn about human nutrition and kind of eating and the gut microbiome and all that kind of stuff. So it's this is very controversial, but lots of agriculture universities are sponsored by big ag. So soil health, the very basics of looking after your soil and it being a sponge when it rains and being a kind of circular system where all the nutrients go around, that really isn't taught, and it needs to be. And it's really basic stuff. It's not sexy, but it's the simple stuff.
Yes, and in fact, if we looked after our soils better, they would store a lot more carbon, wouldn't they? Which would be beneficial for.
And then when it rained, we wouldn't have huge flooding events, and then people that live in streets in the middle of Carlisle wouldn't have houses that are worth 40 grand opposed to 150 grand.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent, thank you. Soil.
I've written soil.
Excellent, we've got that. Now we're going to hear from Councillor Rishi Madlani. So tell us your experience.
So thanks for having me on this panel. It's a real honour to be amongst real specialists and experts in the ag space. So as mentioned earlier, I'm on the executive of SEER, which is Labour's environment campaign. It's our 50th birthday. SEER is much older than me, obviously, but so lots of events. Please do go and support them. It's been about embedding climate into the core of everything the Labour Party does. If we're going to tackle the net zero journey we need to go on, we need to be thinking about this in every policy area, in every city in the UK and every city and town in the UK, and that's what we're about. And this is why the work we're doing now, 5-6 years ago, we've been fighting to get climate on the agenda. The fact we're here talking about net zero emissions and innovation in agriculture is a sign that this party is ready for government and ready to make those policy choices and decisions that need to be put into place. So firstly, I'm really delighted to be here. Lord Stern, who was the climate advisor I brought in as a climate advisor at NatWest when I was the head of climate sustainability, highlights that the net zero transition is a 2.5% of global GDP opportunity. This is an opportunity for the UK. We're looking for opportunities to grow. The Tories have left us a very difficult situation with the economy, with inflation out of control, with prices of everything. We're all struggling from London to Leicester. We know it's a really difficult situation. And we've got a really difficult place. This is the growth story and the innovation story where we have British expertise. It's an absolute honour to be amongst the people who work the land to make this country work. And we've got the technology and innovation in our universities. I'm a council member at the University of Leicester. We've got this bright thinking going on across the country. Why are we not connecting up? Because the other Rishi, or bad Rishi as I like to call him, is too busy thinking about how do we politicise net zero and moving away. Climate delay, absolutely disgraceful, because there's an opportunity here that we have to seize. I've got a couple of stats to show, just to finish off on why the Labour Party needs to be doing this, and there's some recent polling by the Labour Climate and Environment Forum, which I'm a trustee of, so Declaration of Interest. 3 in 5 UK adults, 59%, agree that nature-friendly farming should receive increased financial support from the latest government after the general election. Just 7% disagree. People in the UK, voters, also care about this, and I think that's what us politicians are thinking about. Over half of UK adults, 55%, agree that given agriculture is the 5th largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, the government needs to take action. So there's a call from demand from people. And then finally, given that there's 3 in 5, 58% agree that some farming practices contribute to river pollution, which is another area that's a real issue here, we need to be thinking about all this. And rather than obfuscating over net zero, rather than trying to make it a culture war, we need to be taking action, and this is what some of the innovation and the work that's going on here is about.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. Just to talk a bit more about innovation and what we need. Nick, you talked about soil. Ed, what do you think are the areas for your type of farm, for dairy farm, where we need innovation?
Yeah, so when I look at our carbon footprint and the big slices of the pie of emissions that we're producing, the thing that we can't get away from is methane. It's potent, and it makes up about half of our carbon footprint for a litre of milk, and so that's one area. Just
to be clear, just for anyone who doesn't know about methane, greenhouse gas, of course, comes out of cows at either end.
Yeah, 80% from the front and 20% from the back. Which people don't like. They like to mix them two up.
Thank you very much. And methane is a growing problem, not just in the UK but around the world actually, and because methane is about 80 times or 100 times more potent in as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and it's going up instead of coming down, which is what we need to happen. So, okay, tell me a little bit more about what you can do about methane.
So what we've done is we've worked with Mootral, and they developed the garlic extract that garlic is a natural antimicrobial that affects the rumen biota, and basically in the cow's stomach there's two types of bacteria, some produce methane, some don't, and that garlic extract affects the methane producing bacteria, and so we managed to reduce our methane emissions by 30% on that farm.
How do you measure them?
With scientists using lasers, believe it or not. Yeah.
Sounds rather uncomfortable. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Thomas, how could that work across more farms?
Well, it needs to work across more farms because we're not going to tackle this unless it's rolled out system wide. We're not going to tackle this if we don't make this new normal, and nobody that has a cow in their country or in their supply chain is going to meet their goals without addressing cows. Now, that's not something that the cow does wrong or that Ed on his farm does wrong. It just is. Cows feed us. And there's a real opportunity here. And talk about technology, we're talking about designing inputs, smarter inputs we call them, for farmers, so that we can get better outputs for our planet, for our animals, for our humans, and for farmers. We need to absolutely find ways to scale this. We today, just a little bit to add on methane, methane is a gas that is over a 20-year lifetime 84 times as potent as CO2. That's the bad news. The good news is that it goes away after 12 and a half years. So if we reduce the methane level that we have today, now, then in 12 and a half years, anything that's been excreted from before now is gone. So we have a one-time chance to drive down that greenhouse, that heat trapping potential from all those methane emissions that happened in the past 12 and a half years, or prior to adopting our technology, down to today 70% using today's technology. We have technologies in the pipelines. I'm calling them technologies, but they are, because we are a biotech company, but ultimately they're feed additives, to bring it down to 10% of today's emissions within this decade. And that is the only way we see we can move the needle. It's only since Glasgow, since 2021, that people really talk about methane. And really understand the difference of the different gases. CO2 stays in the atmosphere for 600 years. Methane 12 and a half. So yes, it is much more potent now. And after 12 and a half years, of course, that's gone. But that's 20 years or 12 and a half years that buys us time to change our CO2 producing and habits and to develop technologies to sequester CO2. So back to the earlier question, what can government do? There's a real opportunity for governments here to own this. There's a lot of stuff that can be owned here and built into an agenda. There's number one, we're going to reach net zero, or we're going to. So just to get back some statistics, 13% of greenhouse gases in the UK are from methane, and 30% of that comes from cows. 30% comes from enteric fermentation from cows. So that's a huge win if we can drive that down to by 90%. But there's the net zero agenda that can be owned. There is from an enterprise agenda. You know, we are the granddaddy of this space. We are the world leader as far as technologies are concerned in that. There is an opportunity for Britain to showcase what it has produced. This is all homegrown stuff. We talk about being the Singapore of Europe, but we've got to act like Singapore as well if we want to be that. And that's not happening at this moment. There is leveling up of skills. If we scale this to 1.5 billion cows, and we're forecasting that we can be in about 20% of all cows in the world, because no one can serve all the cows, that's a massive opportunity for industry in this country to be producing all those ingredients that can then be put into agricultural products around the world. So there's a huge number of opportunities here that should make it attractive for any government to embrace this, to reach hands with us, and together we reach hands with industry, to get this deployed.
Thank you. Yes, go on.
So one of the things that we know is happening is in Australia and New Zealand there is government support.
Yes.
What does that look like?
It looks in the shape of the New Zealand government coming to us last week and wanting to invest in our company. They are investing in seaweed They're investing in chemicals that are known to be carcinogenic. They're investing in chemicals to reduce methane that are known to be 20 times as ozone depleting as the CFC we've just taken out of our fridges and air conditioners. That's how desperate they are. That's how desperate the planet is to cool this planet down. So I'm not saying they're doing something bad. I'm just saying there is a real urgency in a whole range of countries in the world, whether it's Sweden, Australia, New Zealand, California, China. We just don't see it here yet, and we would like to see it here. So that's what they're doing at the moment, and they're investing, and they are pushing their local heroes, and evidently they're now coming up to us. We'd like to be able to do that in Britain, and I'll close with this. We are constantly dependent on raising funds for investors. We're a biotech company. We are evidently still relatively pre-revenue, and most of our money came from our family and later from American investors. When American investors ask me, okay, what do governments think about that? I have to tell them about my initiatives with the Californian government and giving them comfort that the Californian government is doing something about it, as it is the leading climate state in America. Federal government, forget it. So, but I do get the question, what does your own government do about this? We're investing in a British company, and I have to say, well, they're getting ready, and I can only say that for so long, yeah. And I would love to send a signal to British investors, doing a funding round at the moment actually, that British government is doing something about that.
Excellent. And do you think that Labour should be encouraging innovation, or would it not be easier just to have a meat tax?
Let me assure everybody that there is not going to be a meat tax, and that is in Mark Harper's little or Claire Coutinho's little dream world. Right, in terms of what we should be doing, the Labour Party is quite clear. This is R&D is the way forward for this, and how we invest, both how we provide a level playing field, but also we want net zero to be a driver of economic growth and of development, and this is the only way, by working with companies such as you, that we will be able to deliver that. And it is also the one part, I was the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent North, the home of the potteries. I told you I'd get the potteries in. And we have to take people on a journey as well about explaining how net zero, holding people's hands and explaining how net zero can be a positive in their lives, especially when, and I think it's the same for the farming sector as it is for the companies where I live, they work in energy intensive industry. They work in places where every day they're hearing about threats to their own livelihoods, as well as the cost of everything going up in the middle of a cost of living crisis. We will achieve nothing as politicians unless we take the general public with us, and we need to do that in a way that reassures the sector, that reassures business, but also where we can see opportunities for growth and development and fundamentally jobs. So this all has to tie together as part of our green investment plan that we will ultimately be spending a huge amount of money on.
I understand that the meat tax is politically a very difficult concept to get across, and there are other ways to do this. New Zealand you asked earlier about New Zealand. Yeah. New Zealand has tried this, and it met with a huge resistance, and now they're looking to push that back, given the elections that they're currently having, and softening that. But let's talk about the quantum here. To put every single dairy cow in the UK on a supplement like ours would cost £120 million to reduce today 30%, and down the line 90%. 90% of 30% of 13%. So we're talking about a 1-2% reduction in greenhouse gases in the UK for £120 million investment. If a car company showed up on these shores and said, we have a technology, we want to build our cars here that have a 10% lower emissions than any other car on the planet, any government would run their doors down and throw billions at them and sponsor them. Maybe a meat tax is not the right way, but we as a company and as a startup, we actually shouldn't have to do this, but we have gone around the world. We've worked with the Chinese government, the Swiss government, the New Zealand government, the Californian government, the UAE government to find ways to do this. We know of ways that it doesn't cost the taxpayer a penny. Yeah. Let alone having to do some meat tax. There are ways, but we can only knock on so many doors and show people, and we've shown Defra this. We have written a paper for Defra.
Would you like to share it with us too?
Well, not here yet, but but we have, and part of it has found itself into that net zero statement earlier this year. But that's where that 120 million pounds sits, and this shouldn't be controversial. This is such a big win. Yeah.
Thank you. Nick, do you think that more emphasis should be put on agri-tech?
When I hear you say energy intensive, so we can't continue to mine. More and more and more. You can't keep taking from the earth, and I think we've got sun and soil and rain, and we're really getting hooked on. And I do. It's probably a very good product, but the whole technology area, we've got to get back to basics. We are one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. We are the fattest country in the world, one of them. And we die from, there's more deaths from diet-related diseases. Our birds, all the insects, they're all in decline, and we continue to bash on about in the industrial food paradigm. Have any of you been in an intensive chicken farm or an intensive pig farm? They are grim places, and that's where we're making our food. And so when you have systems like this, and I'm not picking on the system at all, but it drives intensification. Because, for example, say it works with dairy, then it's we need to do beef cattle, and then you need beef cattle in a shed being fed soya from the Amazon, imported, but on paper exercise, it looks very carbon efficient. So I'm just saying, just be cautious, smell the coffee, and just look at the wider picture. And the cycles of governments are so short, and we need long-term thinking. Look at the floods yesterday and the heat down in London yesterday. It's just bonkers to continue on this cycle where we try and put a sticking plaster on our natural world.
Thank you. And Rishi, what does? Oh, sorry.
No, just put.
Yeah.
Changing a depletive agriculture to a restorative agriculture, and what we're doing, addressing today's problem where it is depletive, shouldn't be mutually exclusive. We're here to fix what is not right today. If we're irrelevant tomorrow, that's great. We're Mootral, we're not Kodak. We're going to invent something else, So, but today there is an emergency, and that needs to be addressed today. Fully agree with you on that, and we, by the way, we do more than that. We have solutions that eradicate much of the antibiotic use in livestock. We have a solution that can make at least a dent in soybean meal. So we're not just about what I'm talking about here today. Today is about net zero. So, but developing these technologies, for lack of a better word, is what moves the needle.
But it's also very profit driven. It's not, you're not thinking, I'm going to make money for all those farmers, I'm going to make them very, very wealthy. You're thinking, this could be our little thing that's going to make us a lot of money.
I'll put it into perspective. My family has put £20 million into this when there was no market, when there was no hope that this could ever get anywhere. But someone needed to make a go of that. That was much of our family's capital. And to date, we're still selling at a loss. Today, every British farmer buys our product at a 90% discount over the price that it costs us, and we're hoping to get the money back from carbon credits afterwards. We are being supported by a leading British financial institution, and we are using equity from investors to fund that cash flow. So at the moment, no one's making any money. Down the line, yes, there'll be lots of money, and our business model has a very strong profit-sharing element in it for farmers. Farmers are the key to that.
Thank you. Rishi, the view from Sierra on this, on intensive farming.
Yeah, so I think we've had a leadership deficit from government, and we've got a real opportunity. Sierra has been very consistent that we need to be thinking about both the climate and ecological disaster, nature. I mean, last month we had some of the guidance on a bit techie, but the nature-related financial disclosures, which start to get people seriously thinking about this in frameworks. We see the impact that the TCFD and the climate disclosures have got forced because it trickles down. So we talked about the big food retail companies. That changes their behaviours because they need to think about what their carbon footprint is. So when they're thinking about their supply chains, We have not had this leadership. We had zero on this. The government has almost buried its head in the sand. There was a real opportunity. New York Climate Week was buzzing with this, and there's really good guidance, such excellent thinking being done. But because we're squabbling over where our net zero, because we've had such a lack of leadership, and this is for us really important for an incoming Labour government to be serious about this. It needs to create that leadership for both of you, to have that clear direction, that North Star that government is focused on this. We had consensus in 2008, the Labour government delivered that with the Climate Change Act, and think about what that long-term impact has been, and we need to restore that again on both the climate and ecological emergency.
Excellent, thank you very much.